Hello and welcome to Baji Rao IAS Academy. Today is 27th October 2023. We will be discussing the previous year's questions of Jammu and Kashmir Public Service Commission. Right. So the syllabus of the Jammu and Kashmir Administrative Services and UPSC is similar. So therefore, if you understand the pattern of questions and the syllabus and previous year's questions of this particular Public Service Commission, it will also help you in your UPSC preparation. We have been discussing General Studies Paper 1 of the Jammu and Kashmir Administrative Services. So, with this lecture, we will complete General Studies Paper 1. So, therefore, the first question which we are going to discuss is about the feminization of agriculture. Right. So feminization of agriculture is a very important, particularly in the context of India, because there has been an increasing growth of urbanization as well as migration to urban areas. And very often the migration is driven by the male workforce from rural areas. So therefore, agriculture in rural areas is very often taken up by the women households. Now the question has been asking, urbanization and migration are causing feminization of agriculture. Feminization of agriculture refers to increasing workforce share of women in agriculture sector relative to men. However, the trends have been indicating that there has been an increasing workforce share of women in agriculture sector. So, in the light of the above given statement, discuss the socio-economic impact of feminization of agriculture sector. So, first we need to define what is feminization of agriculture and how urbanization and migration are causing feminization of agriculture sector in India. So, this is the first part of the answer. So therefore, you have to briefly define and briefly explain this, how urbanization and migration are causing feminization of agriculture in India. So in the next part of the answer, you have to write the socio-economic impact of feminization of agriculture sector. So it is always advisable that first you write the social impact and then economic impact of the feminization of agriculture. Now, before discussing this answer, first we need to understand some data and facts related to feminization of agriculture. Around 78% of India's total employed women, so they work in agriculture sector alone. So imagine if 100% or 100 women are engaged in workforce, around 78% of women are engaged in agriculture sector alone. However, 70% of farm work is led by women. 50% of rural women are agricultural laborers. So out of total number of rural women, 50% of women are engaged in agriculture sector. So in rural areas, women workforce participation is very high compared to urban areas. 60% of total food volume is grown by or either produced by women alone. Okay, right. Now, what is the feminization of agriculture? We need to understand feminization of agriculture. As I have told you, feminization of agriculture refers to increasing participation of women in agricultural activities in relative to men. As we have understood, because of migration and urbanization, there has been an increased participation of women in the agriculture sector. For example, in a particular rural area, men have been migrating to urban area for better employment opportunities because of the prevalent agricultural distress in rural areas. So therefore, it has been creating a vacuum in rural areas in terms of agri workforce. So this vacuum is filled by women from the rural areas. Because of this reason, there has been feminization of agriculture as a trend started. However, feminization of agriculture can be interpreted in two ways. So how can we interpret? In the first instance, an increased participation of women, okay, economically active women in the agriculture sector. So either they are self-employed or they are agricultural wage workers. So it is also, this phenomenon is also called as feminization of agriculture. So in this second phenomenon, a general increase in the percentage of women in the agriculture labor force in comparison to men. Okay, so either because more women have started to engage in agriculture sector, or less men have been participating in the agriculture because of migration. Now, whenever the migration takes place, it is very usual that men of those rural areas will migrate to urban areas, and they started to explore opportunities in urban areas, especially in the construction sector. Why construction sector? Because they're very often unskilled manual workers. So because of this reason, they very often engaged in the agriculture construction, right? Now, before discussing the socio-economic impact of the feminization of poverty, feminization of agriculture, feminization of agriculture sector, we need to understand the data related to feminization of agriculture. So 2011 census data has been indicating that 24% increase in the number of female agricultural laborers in the period between 2001 and 2011. So the same census 2011 has also been indicating that out of total main workers, total female workers, 55% of the total workers are agricultural laborers and 24% are cultivators. Now, in economy answers and answers of this nature, you must present relevant data, because data further adds value to your answer. So therefore, you need to maintain certain data and present the data in your answers in order to enrich the content of your answer. Now we need to understand the next part of the question, that is socio-economic impact of the feminization of agriculture sector. So the first and foremost socio-economic impact is, so women very often lack access to property rights, land rights. Okay, so lack of access to land is a major challenge that is being faced by women who are engaged in the agriculture sector. So in fact, agriculture census were conducted in the year 2015-2016. So according to the data given in this particular census, so out of 146 million operational holdings, the female share, the percentage share of female cultivators, operational holders, is just 13.87 percentage out of the total operational land holdings. Okay, so this is a very low compared to the male who hold around 86 percentage of total operational land holdings. So therefore, this is a first and foremost challenge women have been facing when it comes to feminization of poverty. And second major problem is access to credit. So in order to access the institutional credit, the banks or any other financial institution which requires collateral. When women don't have the land rights, when women cannot have a property rights over land, then that could be detrimental, because banks very often seek collateral in the form of this guarantees, the land guarantees or the land records. So when they don't have, they cannot access the institutional credit. So lack of institutional credit would result in a debt trap creation of a debt trap for women, thereby making agriculture less remunerative for women also. Now, as we have discussed, the majority of the economically active women are engaged in the agriculture sector. So, if they don't have access to institutional credit, that could further disincentivize women to practice agriculture, and that would further dent the numbers of women who are participating in the economic activity. So that could be detrimental to the female labor force workforce participation. Okay, right. Now the next major socio-economic impact is women workforce. They lack access to agricultural inputs. So when we compare women with men, so women workforce, they generally lack access to basic resources and modern inputs. So modern inputs in the sense seeds, fertilizers and pesticides. So even if one need subsidized fertilizers, subsidized pesticides and seeds, they should have access to the land records or property rights. So therefore, this has been further disincentivizing women to be part of the agriculture sector, because these modern inputs are very important for the productivity in agriculture sector. So when they are not able to achieve the desired levels of productivity, that could disincentivizes women to take up agriculture as a practice. So the next socio-economic impact is women very often lack access to technology. Okay, so the mechanization of agriculture has very often resulted in women just playing a they're just limited to the low paying traditional works. So they are not actively engaged in all sorts of economic activities related to agriculture, but they are just limited to low paying traditional works. So this further has resulted in, you know, difficult for farm machinery. So in fact, yes, there has been an increased use of farm machinery. So how many number of women you have seen actively operating a tractor in the farmland? So therefore, it is also very difficult for women to operate these farm machinery. So when they cannot operate farm machinery, then the productivity and the input costs would further increase substantially. Right. So next, access to education, training, and extension services. So women very often lack access to education, agriculture training, and extension services. So when we compare it with men, so there's a need for education, training, and extension services. So extension services in the sense that access to new technologies. So access to better farming methods, information about the better farming methods, information about how to use the existing technologies and mechanization. So this can be categorized as extension service. So managing different roles, how can we manage different roles? So in addition to intensive work on the farm all day, so women also expected to fulfill the domestic obligations. So women are under the dual burden, whether it is working women in the formal sector or informal sector. A dual burden involves that women have been engaging in the agriculture and also household chores. So in addition to intensive work on the farm all day, women also expected to fulfill certain domestic obligations. So those domestic obligations involve cooking, child rearing, water collection, fuel wood gathering, and household maintenance. So these additional obligations are dual burden the role of women, and these dual burdens would further impacting women. Next, feminization of poverty. So feminization of agriculture has further leading to feminization of poverty, because women very often lack viable livelihood alternatives. So since they lack other livelihood opportunities, they are very often forced to take up the farm activities. So the farm activities are already left by men because they are very unremunerative. Why unremunerative? Because of the prevalent agricultural distress. And we very often experience the violence against women at workplace, and this is also evident in the farming. Women very often face violence and sexual harassment at workplace, and this is a very major issue that is being faced by women in the agricultural labors, in the agriculture sector. So women agricultural laborers and cultivators, they often face violence and sexual harassment. And in the agriculture sector, such nature of harassment and violence against women is very often go unreported or unnoticed. So therefore, the women in these sectors are more vulnerable. Next, health and occupational hazards. So women face, health hazards in the cultivation of many crops and plantations because women were not given adequate training, lack of protective gears, and they also have a long working hours. So therefore, these things together resulted in health and occupational hazards for women. So in India, women also lack the nutritional security, and this will further perpetuate the health issues. So if you look at the data on number of women who are suffering with anemia, so around 57% of Indian women have been suffering with the anemia problem. Along with this, number of women have been facing the nutritional issues. So all these factors combined together will result in the severe socio-economic consequences on the part of the woman. So however, it is encouraging that women have been participating in the economic sector and agriculture sector. So they constantly ensure food security and nutritional security for the country. Now in this context, you could also write these suggestions to make sure women will not face these serious or severe socio-economic consequences. So for example, the diversifying livelihood opportunities for women. So in the sense that women not just engage in agriculture sector, but they can also actively take part in the dairy, fishery, aquaculture, horticulture crops, apiculture, and sericulture. These sectors will ensure women have diverse opportunities, and the government has also been providing policy support for the women who have been engaged in these sectors, and the women could also access the markets through their products. So thereby it could reduce the negative impacts of the feminization of the agriculture sector. So this is how you can conclude this answer. So next question is about the seismic noise. So what do you understand by seismic noise? And discuss the impact of seismic activities on the Earth's surface. So this question has two parts. So in the first part, you need to discuss the impact of the seismic activities on the Earth's surface, and in the second part, in the first part, you need to describe, write about the seismic noise. What exactly you understood by the seismic noise, and what is its impact on the Earth's surface. So first and foremost, the seismic activity usually refers to a persistent vibration of the ground. Okay, so it is a continuous or the persistent vibration of the ground. So however, the seismic noise is often unwanted component of signals that are being recorded by the seismometer. Okay, so they are unwanted component. Why it is unwanted component? Because one reason is they are persistent vibration, and the second reason is these seismic noises makes it very difficult for scientists to study the seismic data that is more valuable. Seismic data is very important to predict the earthquake vulnerability of a particular region. However, because of the persistent seismic noise, it is often become very difficult for scientists to study the seismic data. Okay, the seismic data is more valuable and very important. So this seismic noise includes vibrations. So these vibrations which are being caused by human activity such as transport and manufacturing sectors. So the transportation, manufacturing, mining, quarrying, so everything will result in a continuous or the persistent vibration of the ground. So therefore these activities will result in seismic noise, creation of a seismic noise over an extended period of time. This seismic noise which is being created by human activity, so they are of very high frequency. So very high frequency in the sense that it is in between 1 to 100 Hz. Okay, so they travel through Earth's surface layers. Now this seismic noise is also termed as ambient vibrations. Okay, so because of the oil exploration, hydrology, earthquake engineering. So in all these studies, these seismic noise are referred to as ambient vibrations. Okay, so you just understand the difference between the seismic noise and the earthquakes. So seismic noise is a persistent vibration. So it is different from the earthquake and earthquake caused seismic vibrations. Now we have written the first part of the answer. So that is about the seismic noise. And the second part of the answer, it is about the effects on the Earth's surface due to the seismic noise. First and foremost, the ground shaking. So when the seismic noise has been taking place continuously, it releases energy. Okay, so it releases energy, and this energy will further trigger the seismic waves. And these seismic waves can cause the ground to shake in that particular region. Okay, so whenever an earthquake takes place, there's an epicenter. Okay, so epicenter is an area where earthquakes usually originate. Right. So an area which is closer to epicenter, so usually experience more intense shaking of the ground. So such an intense shaking is very often comes with the significant damage to structures and infrastructure, and significant damage would result in loss of lives. So damage to man-made structures is also a possibility because of the seismic noises. So one of the most noticeable effects on the earthquakes is damage that is being caused to buildings, bridges, roads, and other man-made structures. So if infrastructure that is not prone to earthquakes, that could create a large-scale destruction. It is very often associated with loss of human lives. And in case if it is a poor country or underdeveloped country, so constant continuous destruction of infrastructure would result in it may not cope up with such earthquakes. So it would further become more and more vulnerable, and the infrastructure would more and more prone to these disasters and damages. So the next major impact is it could trigger landslides and avalanches in those areas. Okay, so for example, in a particular area, if there is a steep slope, a very steep slope, this is a gradual slope. So if there is a steep slope in a particular area, so these steep slopes, so or unstable terrains over these steep slopes, so they can trigger landslides and avalanches, a continuous or persistent seismic waves. Okay, so this is also very often associated with a large scale destruction of infrastructure and also loss of human lives. Now landslides can damage structures, block roads, and even bury the entire communities. Okay, so it will lead to the additional casualties, and it could also hinder the rescue and relief operations. So recently you can see we can observe the glacial lake outburst floods in Sikkim. It is one of the most vulnerable area for landslides and avalanches. So, okay, so and these landslides and avalanches very often block the course of a river. So when they block the course of a river, the river changes its course and thereby submerging nearby areas. Okay, this could also result in large scale destruction of infrastructure and loss of lives. Next, these seismic activities would also trigger large scale tsunamis. Okay, so underwater earthquakes, they can generate tsunamis, and these tsunamis, particularly those occurring along the tectonic plate boundaries. So in case there are two tectonic plate boundaries, either they slide past one another. So either they are transform boundaries. Okay, so convergent boundaries or divergent boundaries. So it could also result in triggering a large scale tsunami. So massive tsunami waves or massive ocean waves, so they can travel a very long distances at a much higher speed. When they reach coastal areas, they cause devastating flooding. So apart from this, tsunamis also pose a significant threat to coastal communities, and they can result in widespread destruction and loss of lives. So therefore, in this context, we need to identify, map the areas which are vulnerable for the large scale seismic activities. For example, an earthquake or the natural seismic uh, data, or naturally a particular region is a vulnerable region. For example, Pacific Ring of Fire, so that is vulnerable to earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. So in those areas, these activities should be refrained, so that the data could be gathered more proactively. Okay. So next, we need to discuss about the cloud seeding. So what exactly the cloud seeding? The question states that explain cloud seeding, its associated forms, structures, and environmental concerns which are being associated with cloud seeding. Now, first and foremost, we need to understand what exactly is cloud seeding. So cloud seeding is actually a method. So it is an artificial method to induce rainfall. For example, in a particular area, there's a no rainfall or a very less rainfall. So artificially inducing a chemical or spraying a chemical into the clouds. The chemical is called as silver iodide. So this chemical would further intensify the rainfall. So therefore, more rainfall over a particular period of time, a particular region for a very short period of time. So now cloud seeding is a process of spreading silver iodide into clouds. So it will stimulate the precipitation process to form rain and snow. Now silver, what is the silver iodide? Silver iodide is a yellow insoluble powder. So this powder darkens when it is exposed to the light. So this is cloud seeding. So how cloud seeding usually takes place? Firstly, silver iodide is sprayed across the propane flame. So if there is a propane flame, then silver iodide is sprayed across a propane flame. And in the second step, the silver iodide particles rise into the clouds. So these silver iodide particles which are already being sprayed, so they rise into the clouds. Now once they rise into the clouds, the silver iodide causes cloud moisture to freeze and create ice crystals. So it would create ice crystals. Okay, so because it results in further growing the number of further growing the accumulation of water, so that could create more and more ice crystals. So these ice crystals grow big enough to fall as snow in the last step. So they either fall as a snow or a rainfall. So this is how cloud seeding usually works. Now again, we will take this opportunity to understand what is cloud seeding. So cloud seeding is a process of spreading either dry ice or more commonly silver iodide aerosols. So these silver iodide aerosols are spread into the upper part sections of clouds. So when they spread in the upper clouds, this could stimulate the precipitation and they can form rainfall over a particular area. So cloud seeding uses planes to spray the clouds with chemicals. So once the silver iodide chemical is sprayed into clouds, this will condense into a smaller particles. This will condense the smaller particles into a larger raindrops. Now after that, the cloud seeding increases the rainfall rates as well. Okay, so because it helps in further growing the accumulation of water. So therefore it could further increase 10 to 30% rainfall per year. So through cloud seeding we can overcome the negative consequences of El Nino and drought like conditions over a particular area. Okay, so the cloud seeding operations cost much less than the desalination process. So what is the desalination process? Desalination process uses reverse osmosis technique. So to turn saline water into potable drinking water. Okay, so it costs, this cloud seeding method costs much less than the desalination process. So however, several Middle East countries have been exploring the opportunities of cloud seeding. Okay, so they are traditionally prone to less rainfall or scanty rainfall. Now what are the methods of cloud seeding? So the methods which we can be used for cloud seeding or inducing rainfall. So first and foremost method is hygroscopic cloud seeding. So this method is known as hygroscopic cloud seeding. So in this method, particularly salts are being dispersed, so across the clouds or the lower portions of clouds. Okay. So these salts which are already dispersed into the clouds, they grow in size, and once they grow in size, water also joins them, and that could also result in rainfall in that region. The second method which we can use for cloud seeding is a static cloud seeding method. So this static cloud seeding method uses chemicals like silver iodide. So the silver iodide is spread or sprayed into the clouds. Silver iodide provides a crystal around which a moisture can condense. For example, this is a crystal, and around these crystals moisture would condense. Okay, these silver iodide crystals. Now the moisture which is already present in the clouds, so there are clouds, in those clouds moisture is already present. So what happens when we spray silver iodide? The moisture which is already present in these clouds will condense around these crystals. So the silver iodide will essentially makes the rain clouds more effective at dispensing their water. So this is one of the most essential, most effective method of inducing artificial rains. So the third method which is being used for cloud seeding is dynamic cloud seeding. Okay, so this dynamic cloud seeding, this aims to boost the vertical air currents. Okay, so these are vertical air currents. So these vertical air currents encourages more water to pass through the clouds. So when vertical air currents are being induced, more and more water passes through these clouds. So this could translate into more rainfall. So however, the dynamic cloud seeding method is considered as more and more complex compared to the hygroscopic cloud seeding and static cloud seeding methods. Okay, so because the static because it depends on sequence of events working properly. Okay, so a number of events working in a sequence. So all these methods work properly, then only we can induce rainfall in the dynamic cloud seeding method. So therefore it is more complex when we compare it with the static cloud seeding and hygroscopic cloud seeding methods. So please remember all these methods of cloud seeding. However, the cloud seeding is not free from the negative consequences or negative environmental consequences. So what are the challenges which are being involved in the cloud seeding method? Okay, so first and foremost, the potential side effects of cloud seeding method. We need to understand the side effects of the cloud seeding method. So first side effect is the chemicals which are being used in cloud seeding. So they potentially harmful for plants, animals, and people environment as well. So they are very harmful for the environment. For example, so if you look at the acid rains, so they are also very harmful to the plants, animals, people, and the environment. So in a similar way, cloud seeding also have a huge negative repercussions for plants, animals, and people. Secondly, these the cloud seeding would result in abnormal weather patterns. Okay, so now we are living in an era where climate change has been determining our weather patterns. So cloud seeding would further result or further create abnormal weather patterns. So, for example, India, which is receiving rainfall through the southwest monsoon and northeast monsoon, but in an El Nino year, if we use cloud seeding method, so that could impact the normal monsoon or the monsoon in a normal year as well. So, therefore, it is not free from the abnormal weather patterns over a particular region if that region uses the cloud seeding method. Okay, so this ultimately, or it might ultimately change the climatic patterns on the planet Earth, because places they usually receive moisture, so they might start experiencing drought due to the artificial process of adding chemicals. Now there are areas which naturally receive moisture, but what we did with the cloud seeding method, we started we started inducing the chemicals. Okay, so therefore in order to you know those areas which have been naturally receiving the moisture, so would experience the drought like conditions because of this artificial methods. And the third major challenge is these cloud seeding methods are very costly. So not costly, not just costly in terms of its negative consequences on environment, but financially also it is very costly, because we have to use planes to spray these chemicals into clouds. Okay, so this method of cloud seeding usually involves processes which deliver the chemicals into the sky, so releasing them into the airplanes, shots, or airplanes. So it very often involves huge costs and logistics preparation. So poor countries cannot afford the cloud seeding method. So cloud seeding method would also result in pollution. Okay, so because the artificial rainfall, seeding agents like silver iodide, dry ice, salt, so they will also fall. Okay, so the residual silver, once we sprayed silver iodide over the clouds, so after spraying the silver iodide and we induced a rainfall over a particular region, the residual silver iodide in an area. Okay, so after this cloud seeding process or the cloud seeding is over, is considered as a toxic material. The residual silver iodide is considered as a toxic material. So as for dry ice, it can also be a source of greenhouse gas that contributes to global warming. Okay, so it is also a source of global warming as it basically carbon dioxide. So now how cloud seeding process actually works. So first and foremost, earlier also we understood how cloud seeding process is usually takes place. Okay, so first silver iodide is released by a plane or ground-based generator. So this ground-based generator or a plane would spray silver iodide into the clouds. Secondly, the silver iodide particles, once they sprayed into these clouds, they accumulate water around these particles. Okay. So next, the silver iodide further aids in the formation of ice crystals. Okay, so these ice crystals become large enough to fall on ground. Okay, so they fall on ground. When they grow larger, they fall on ground. So this is how the cloud seeding method usually works, and its associated negative impacts on the environment. So now the next question is about the sugarcane industry. Now, India is one of the largest sugar producing country, and India is also a country with a largest area under the sugarcane cultivation. Now, in this context, the question asked, explaining the problems faced by sugar industry in India, account for the measures which are being taken by the government. So, what are the measures which are being taken by the government? The first and foremost, we need to write some data about the sugar industry, and then the problems which the sugar industry has been facing, and we should also write the measures which are being taken by the government in this regard. So, firstly, India has become the largest producer of sugar in the world. So earlier, Brazil had used to hold the distinction of a largest sugar producer in the world. Now India has become the largest producer of sugar in the world. So, however, the sugar sector has been reeling under difficulties. Okay, because of various reasons, it has been reeling under various difficulties. So, if you look at the data of the sugar industry, you can understand the importance of the sugar industry, because first and foremost, you have to understand sugar industry is an agro-based industry. So sugar industry provides livelihood opportunities to around 50 million sugarcane farmers. So it also provides around 5 lakh workers directly employed in sugar mills across India. Okay, so it provides employment opportunities to 50 million sugarcane farmers, and also 5 lakh workers are directly engaged in these sugar mills. So sugar industry in India is the largest agro-based industry. So after the cotton and textile industry. Okay, so please keep in mind this data. This data is very important. So sugar industry is second largest agro-based industry in India after cotton and textile industry. Now, what are the problems which the sugar industry has been facing in India? So first and foremost issue the sugar industry has been facing is issues related to the cultivation of sugarcane. So we all know that sugar is a water intensive crop. So what does it mean when we say water intensive crop? So those crops which requires excessive amounts of water. So they cannot be cultivated in a region where water facilities are not adequate. The irrigation facilities are not adequate. So India is a country which is facing water distress, water stress. So therefore, because of its water incentive nature, the sugarcane cultivation has been declining over a period of time. So because there's a huge water shortage in India, and most of the states which are growing sugar, whether it is UP, Maharashtra, Karnataka, so most of the states which are the primary sugar growing states, they depend on monsoon for irrigation. So they lack irrigation infrastructure. So they have been facing water stress. So they are dependent on monsoon rainfall. So because of this reason, the gross cropped area or the net sown area of sugarcane has been declining. The second major issue the sugarcane industry is facing is uncertain production output. Okay, so production of sugar also varies from year to year. For example, one particular year there has been a high production of sugarcane. So on the other hand, there will be a decline of sugarcane. So this has been resulting in fluctuation of prices. So prices are not constant, prices are not stable. So international markets have also been determining the prices of these sugarcane industries. So this has been leading to losses in times of excess production. Okay, so whenever there is an excess production, the prices would decline, and when prices were lower, farmers have to face the problems. Okay, so the second major issue that the sugarcane industry facing is issues related to production. Okay, so India is a country which has been experiencing, or which has been facing problems with respect to a very low yield of sugarcane. Okay, for example, if you look at India's yields of sugarcane, so they are extremely low when you compare it with other countries in the tropical areas, or when you compare it with the other sugarcane producing countries. So there are examples are given. So India's yield is only 64.5 tons per hectare. When you compare this data with Indonesia, it is around 90 tons per hectare. On the other hand, Hawaii with 121 to 121 tons of per hectare of sugarcane. And the other major issue is India has a very short crushing season. So crushing season, once you harvest the sugarcane, and it is transported to the sugar industry. So India has a very short crushing season. On the other hand, several countries have a round the year crushing seasons. So sugar production is a seasonal industry. Okay, so with a very short crushing season, so it varies normally from 4 to 7 months in a year. So similarly, the crushing industry is not located evenly across India. So it is majorly concentrated in few pockets of few states. So it has resulted in a financial loss and loss. It is also creating seasonal employment in a few seasons. Employees they get employment, and when the industries are they're not in the crushing season, so they lose employment. So therefore it further creates lack of full utilization of sugar mills. So these sugar mills are not utilized at their full capacity. Now the next major problem is the low recovery of sugar. Okay, so the average rate of recovery of sugar from sugarcane in India is less than 10%. So it is a very quite low as compared to other major sugar producing countries. Okay, so this is another major problem. So next we need to write the policy issues. So or the measures which are being taken by the the measures which we'll discuss later, but policy issues. The policy issue is that the pricing issue. So high fair and remunerative prices which are being announced for sugarcane leads to overproduction of sugarcane, hence price distortion. So it usually happens that whenever there is a high production of sugarcane, because of these fair and remunerative prices, it results in price distortion. Okay, so it also makes sugar industries go out of business. So they very often face losses. Even several sugar industries, they're not even in a position to pay off the fair and remunerative prices for the procured sugarcane. And the WTO subsidy issue is also a major problem because India has been providing fair and remunerative prices for the sugarcane farmers. So it has created certain problems at the WTO. So Australia, Brazil opposes the sugar subsidy which is being provided by India. So because these are also the countries which are producing sugarcane or sugar at a large scale. So the next major problem is that politicization of sugar cooperatives. The sugar industry in India is largely handled and controlled by sugar cooperatives. Okay, so the leaders of these sugar cooperatives very often aspire to become, the members of legislature of a particular state or at the central level. So this has been very often resulting in politicization of state cooperatives. Okay, so it is often come with the ineffectiveness of these sugar cooperatives. So what are the government initiatives which are being taken in this regard? The first and foremost measure taken by the government is ethanol blending program. Okay, so under this ethanol blending program, the government has envisioned that around 20% of total ethanol, 20% of total ethanol should be procured from should be blended with petrol. Okay, 20% of ethanol should be blended with petrol. So therefore, the ethanol production capacity of molasses and sugar-based distilleries has increased 605 crore liters per annum. Okay, so this has further increased, and the progress is still continuing to meet its target of 20% ethanol blending by the year 2025. So the government has also announced the fair and remunerative prices. Okay, so fair and remunerative prices is the minimum price that sugar mills have to pay to sugarcane farmers for the procurement of sugarcane. Okay, so it is determined, the fair and remunerative price is usually determined on the basis of recommendations of Commission for Agricultural Costs and Prices. So the very same commission which also recommends minimum support prices for the farmers. Okay, right. So next, the state advised price. So now the central government decides fair and remunerative prices. The state government can also set a state advised price for the sugar mills. So they have to, the state advised price is also being paid by the sugar mills to the farmers. The next, Rangarajan committee is also set up to recommend, to make recommendations for the revival of sugarcane industry. So it was set up to give recommendations on regulation of sugar industry. So how can we regulate the sugar industry? How could we make the sugarcane? How can we solve the problems which are being faced by the sugarcane industry? Okay. So this is all about the sugarcane industry, which are the problems that are being faced by sugarcane industry, and the measures and initiatives taken by the government. So that's all for today. And in the next session, we will start with the next paper. Okay. So thank you.